The Abyss Explorer descended into the Mariana Rift with a slow, almost reverential grace, the thick steel hull groaning against pressures that would have crushed ordinary vessels as easily as a paper cup. And yet, inside, the air hummed with nervous anticipation, a tension that spread through the crew like static electricity as Captain Elena Marquez's hands rested lightly on the controls, her eyes scanning the dim array of monitors that painted ghostly reflections across the curved interior, each screen showing rippling darkness so absolute it seemed as though they had left the sun itself behind, diving into a world untouched by human feet, a place where the pressure was measured not in pounds per square inch, but in the crushing weight of eternity, where light could not penetrate and the very water seemed alive, coiling and stretching in invisible currents, carrying with it the unknown, the whisper of creatures that had ruled these depths long before humanity had mastered flight or even fire. And as the sub's lights pierced the blackness, illuminating only the immediate foggy shadows, the crew felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature, a creeping sense that they were intruding into a domain that resented their presence, a territory of ancient, unknowable life. And then the first anomaly appeared on the sonar, a shape moving with impossible speed and precision, massive, undulating, yet deliberate, as though it were aware of their tiny intrusion, and Dr. Malik's voice, usually calm and analytical, betrayed a hint of awe and fear as he muttered, "Captain, that isn't a natural formation." And Elena's eyes narrowed as the monitors displayed erratic blips that defied explanation, signals that pulsed with intelligence, not randomness, not geological formations or currents, but something alive, something that thought, that calculated, and that reacted instantly to the sub's approach. And before the crew could adjust, the water itself seemed to ripple unnaturally, waves folding and twisting in patterns that made no physical sense. And then, a piercing beam of blinding light erupted from the depths, slicing through the darkness like a knife, emanating from a shape so alien that even in the sub's brief glimpses, it defied understanding. A probe, or craft not of human design, hovering with calculated precision, scanning, analyzing, probing every inch of the abyss. And the crew could feel the pulse of energy it emitted, high-frequency vibrations that made the hull shiver as though the ocean itself were resonating with a force beyond comprehension. And then the pulse intensified, and the water around the sub roiled, boiling and twisting as shadows erupted from the inky blackness. Enormous forms that had been dormant for centuries now awakening, drawn to the alien intrusion. And with horrifying speed, one of these shapes lunged, a tentacle thicker than the submarine itself, wrapping around the hull with a sound like grinding stone, twisting, crushing, testing the limits of the engineer's design. And alarms shrieked as lights flickered violently, throwing the crew into a frenzy of activity, each member shouting over the cacophony, trying to stabilize the vessel, firing countermeasures, thrusters, and none of it seemed to slow the relentless pressure of the creature that was now thrashing around them. Every movement measured, intelligent, almost playful in its precision, as though it were studying them, gauging their weaknesses. And Elena's mind raced, calculating angles, escape routes, the depths, the currents, anything that could give them an advantage. And then the first wave of realization hit. These weren't ordinary sea monsters. The alien probe's pulse had altered them, enhancing their speed, strength, and cognitive abilities in ways nature alone could not. And every weapon, every countermeasure they possessed seemed trivial, laughably inadequate against the sheer adaptive brutality of these deep-sea behemoths. And as the submarine pitched and groaned under the pressure, the crew's panic intermingled with awe, because in the corner of Elena's eye, she saw shapes moving with coordination, almost communicating, shadows that disappeared and reappeared with terrifying intent. And it became chillingly clear that they were not alone, not in this sense. that the probe and the awakened creatures were connected, that some intelligence had designed a hierarchy, a system of control, and humans were the smallest piece in a game far larger than their comprehension. And then, Dr. Malik shouted as the sonar flickered wildly, displaying multiple incoming blips that were too fast, too coordinated to be random, tracing a path that suggested strategic thinking, maneuvering surrounding. And Elena felt a shiver run down her spine as the realization sank in. They were being hunted, tested, observed, and perhaps evaluated for survival or elimination. And in the midst of the chaos, the sub's emergency lights revealed glimpses of monstrous shapes, serpentine bodies armored like tanks, tentacles tipped with glowing bioluminescent nodes pulsing in rhythm with the alien probe's signals, eyes that glimmered with intelligence, creatures that had evolved beyond natural design and now exhibited calculated aggression. And Elena's mind raced, calculating angles, escape routes, the depths, the currents, anything that could give them an advantage. And then the first wave of realization hit. These weren't ordinary sea monsters. The alien probe's pulse had altered them, enhancing their speed, strength, and cognitive abilities in ways nature alone could not. And every weapon, every countermeasure they possessed seemed trivial, laughably inadequate against the sheer adaptive brutality of these deep-sea behemoths. And as the submarine pitched and groaned under the pressure, the crew's panic intermingled with awe, because in the corner of Elena's eye, she saw shapes moving with coordination, almost communicating, shadows that disappeared and reappeared with terrifying intent. And it became chillingly clear that they were not alone, not in this sense, that the probe and the awakened creatures were connected, that some intelligence had designed a hierarchy, a system of control, and humans were the smallest piece in a game far larger than their comprehension. And then, Dr. Malik shouted as the sonar flickered wildly, displaying multiple incoming blips that were too fast, too coordinated to be random, tracing a path that suggested strategic thinking, maneuvering surrounding. And Elena felt a shiver run down her spine as the realization sank in. They were being hunted, tested, observed, and perhaps evaluated for survival or elimination. And amidst of the chaos, the sub's emergency lights revealed glimpses of monstrous shapes, serpentine bodies armored like tanks, tentacles tipped with glowing bioluminescent nodes pulsing in rhythm with the alien probe's signals, eyes that glimmered with intelligence, creatures that had evolved beyond natural design and now exhibited calculated aggression. And Elena's mind raced, calculating angles, escape routes, the depths, the currents, anything that could give them an advantage. And then the first wave of realization hit. These weren't ordinary sea monsters. The alien probe's pulse had altered them, enhancing their speed, strength, and cognitive abilities in ways nature alone could not. And every weapon, every countermeasure they possessed seemed trivial, laughably inadequate against the sheer adaptive brutality of these deep-sea behemoths. And as the submarine pitched and groaned under the pressure, the crew's panic intermingled with awe, because in the corner of Elena's eye, she saw shapes moving with coordination, almost communicating, shadows that disappeared and reappeared with terrifying intent. And it became chillingly clear that they were not alone, not in this sense, that the probe and the awakened creatures were connected, that some intelligence had designed a hierarchy, a system of control, and humans were the smallest piece in a game far larger than their comprehension. And then, Dr. Malik shouted as the sonar flickered wildly, displaying multiple incoming blips that were too fast, too coordinated to be random, tracing a path that suggested strategic thinking, maneuvering surrounding. And Elena felt a shiver run down her spine as the realization sank in. They were being hunted, tested, observed, and perhaps evaluated for survival or elimination. And in the midst of the chaos, the sub's emergency lights revealed glimpses of monstrous shapes, serpentine bodies armored like tanks, tentacles tipped with glowing bioluminescent nodes pulsing in rhythm with the alien probe's signals, eyes that glimmered with intelligence, creatures that had evolved beyond natural design and now exhibited calculated aggression. And Elena's mind raced, calculating angles, escape routes, the depths, the currents, anything that could give them an advantage. And then the first wave of realization hit. These weren't ordinary sea monsters. The alien probe's pulse had altered them, enhancing their speed, strength, and cognitive abilities in ways nature alone could not. And every weapon, every countermeasure they possessed seemed trivial, laughably inadequate against the sheer adaptive brutality of these deep-sea behemoths. And as the submarine pitched and groaned under the pressure, the crew's panic intermingled with awe, because in the corner of Elena's eye, she saw shapes moving with coordination. The Abyss Explorer twisted and darted through the jagged canyons of the Mariana Rift, its hull quivering under pressure that would have annihilated ordinary machines, the crew clinging to every control with knuckles white and breaths shallow as the alien-enhanced leviathans pursued with relentless precision, their glowing appendages slicing through the darkness like spectral whips. And yet, despite the panic that gnawed at them, a cold realization crept into Elena Marquez's mind. They were not merely being attacked, they were being studied, tested, evaluated by both the creatures and the probe that hovered above them like an omniscient eye, its pulses still resonating through the water, causing shivers to run through the submarine's metal frame and echoes to rattle through the minds of the crew. And as the sonar flickered erratically, displaying coordinated blips that moved in patterns too precise to be random, Dr. Malik pointed to the trench walls, his voice trembling with a mix of awe and fear. "Captain, these markings, they're glowing, and every time a creature moves, they pulse in rhythm, like a command sequence." And Elena's stomach tightened, a cold wave of understanding washing over her. The aliens had not only engineered these monsters, but had also implanted a system of control into the very architecture of the abyss, the walls themselves acting as conduits, transmitting energy or information that guided the behavior of these terrifying beasts, making every lunge, every strike, every movement against the sub calculated, almost impossibly intelligent. And the realization was horrifying. Humans were the smallest, most unpredictable element in a vast experiment that stretched across the ocean floor, a war game in which the players were unaware of the rules, forced to improvise or perish. And as the sub weaved through narrow caverns that scraped its hull with every motion, the engineered leviathans followed without hesitation, squeezing through crevices and suddenly darting into open spaces with the speed and coordination of a predator hive mind, while the alien probe adjusted its pulses, changing the rhythm, the frequency, and the intensity as though it were learning in real time, refining the monster's behavior to corner, isolate, and eliminate. And in the chaos, alarms blared, lights flickered, and the crew found themselves scrambling between consoles, flipping switches, rerouting power, activating emergency thrusters in desperate, improvisational maneuvers that felt like dancing on the edge of annihilation. Yet, despite the terror, Elena's mind remained sharp, a beacon of human ingenuity cutting through the storm of fear. And she realized that the monster's movements, while enhanced and intelligent, still followed patterns, still relied on the alien pulses, and if she could manipulate the signals, mimic the frequencies just enough, they might be able to buy seconds, minutes, hours of survival, time enough to understand what they were truly facing. And as she shouted orders, rerouting the sub's experimental sonar to imitate the alien pulses, the creatures hesitated, their glowing appendages flickering in uncertainty, the first sign of weakness the crew had seen since entering the abyss. But just as hope flickered, a colossal tentacle smashed into the sub with a force that twisted its frame, sending sparks flying across the control panels. And in that instant, Elena knew they had to go beyond imitation. They had to innovate, to think like the aliens, to understand the mechanics of control and exploit them. And as Dr. Malik scanned the trench walls, he traced a pattern in the glowing markings, connecting symbols and pulses that seemed to correspond to the creature's attacks, movements, even breathing. And the crew realized, with mounting horror, that the aliens had turned the environment itself into a weapon, encoding instructions into the walls of the abyss, programming the monsters not just biologically, but architecturally, so that every twist of the canyon, every ridge and crevice, became part of a living, breathing trap designed to crush anything that dared enter. And in that realization came the next horrifying twist. The aliens' ultimate goal was not merely to experiment, but to weaponize the ocean itself, transforming Earth's depths into a factory for unstoppable monsters that could one day extend beyond the planet, conquering worlds with engineered leviathans grown and controlled beneath the waves. And humanity, in this tiny sub, was witnessing the first step of an interstellar plan that dwarfed their comprehension. And yet, in the midst of terror, panic, and seemingly unsurmountable odds, Elena's mind lit up with a spark of defiance, the uniquely human ability to improvise, to adapt, to exploit unpredictability, and she issued a daring command. They would use the alien pulse against its own creations, feeding a false signal into the sonar array that mimicked a stronger, more dominant presence, forcing the monsters to hesitate, to question, to act out of sequence. And the effect was immediate. One by one, the massive, thrashing forms began to falter, colliding with walls, misjudging distances, their intelligence temporarily confused by the human's ingenuity, while the probe above flickered, its pulses erratic, as though it too had not anticipated the chaos that mere mortals could create. And as the sub twisted through a particularly narrow chasm, a moment of pure HFY brilliance emerged when a crew member, improvising with the robotic arms, used debris from the canyon to create a trap for one of the colossal beasts, funneling it into a constricted passage too small for its enhanced bulk. The monster trapped and thrashing, lights flickering, sparks flying, giving the humans a precious window to advance deeper into the trench. And yet, the relief was fleeting, for as they moved forward, another layer of horror revealed itself. In the shadows of the canyon, hybrid creatures, part organic, part alien-engineered, eyes glowing with malice, were waiting. And Elena understood in a gut-churning instant that this was a multi-phase trial, a gauntlet designed to push every human instinct, every ounce of courage, every shred of ingenuity. And they had already passed the first test, but many more lay ahead. Tests that would demand the full measure of their adaptability, teamwork, and resilience. And in that suspended moment, the submarine rocked violently as a massive wave, stirred by the coordinated attacks of the engineered leviathans, slammed into the hull, twisting it like paper. And the lights flickered, alarms screamed, and for a heartbeat, the crew feared they were about to meet their end in a darkness deeper than death. But then, Elena's mind clicked into overdrive, rerouting energy, synchronizing sonar pulses with the sub's thrusters, guiding the vessel in a dance that mirrored the monster's own movements, anticipating, outthinking, and using the very architecture of the canyon against the creatures, forcing them into dead ends, trapping some, isolating others, all the while the alien probe above flickered, its signals interrupted. And for the first time, humanity had a tangible advantage, however fleeting. And as the crew held their breath, pushing machinery and minds to their absolute limits, they realized something astonishing. The aliens created these monsters with one goal: control. But humans were not controllable. Humans could improvise, adapt, and exploit unpredictability. And in that defiance lay a fragile hope, the first spark of triumph in a nightmare that had no guarantees. And as the sub twisted deeper into the uncharted trench, the crew braced themselves, knowing that even greater horrors awaited, that the alien plan was far from complete, and the ocean, alive and ancient, held secrets and threats beyond imagination. And yet, for the first time, in the deepest darkness on Earth, surrounded by engineered monsters and alien manipulation, humanity had a foothold, a glimmer of hope, and a reminder of the ultimate truth that would carry them through the coming trials. Humans adapt, humans fight, humans survive, and the Abyss would soon learn that defying humanity came at a price it had never expected. The Abyss explorer plunged deeper into the Mariana Rift, the canyon walls closing in like the jaws of some ancient leviathan, the pressure so immense that every movement of the submarine echoed like a death knell through the hull. But despite the unrelenting terror, Captain Elena Marquez refused to yield to fear, her mind a sharpened instrument, racing through possibilities, contingencies, and improvisations as the engineered leviathans continued their relentless pursuit, their bioluminescent nodes pulsing in precise synchronization with the alien probe above. The water around them alive with invisible currents that guided the creature's attacks with ruthless efficiency. Yet even in the midst of this nightmare, a glimmer of hope flickered when Dr. Malik, scanning the trench walls and ancient sonar logs from the abandoned deep-sea stations, noticed patterns that didn't match the alien pulses exactly, subtle harmonics in the currents that seemed natural, almost as if the ocean itself was trying to communicate. And Elena's mind seized on the possibility, a radical thought forming amidst chaos. The engineered monsters were tethered to alien control, but the native deep-sea creatures, the ancient, unaltered guardians of these depths, might respond to a different signal, a human signal, an appeal to instinct rather than programming. And without hesitation, she ordered the sub's experimental harmonic sonar to be activated, adjusting frequencies, modulating pulses, mimicking not alien control, but the natural vibrations of the abyss, sounds that whispered to the ocean as though humans themselves were part of it. A dangerous gamble, untested, relying entirely on the unpredictable intelligence of creatures far older than humanity. And as the first pulse reverberated through the trench, the water seemed to shiver, a low hum echoing through the canyon. And then, almost imperceptibly at first, shadows moved differently, slower, deliberate, eyes reflecting curiosity rather than aggression. The native leviathans, titanic serpentine forms armored with ridges worn by millions of years, were responding, drawn to the human's frequency, assessing, observing, judging. And Elena's heart raced, knowing this was their only chance. And yet the engineered monsters were still a constant threat, moving in coordinated swarms, striking with deadly precision, driven by alien commands. And the sub's lights flickered as the chaos escalated, sparks flying across consoles as tentacles slammed against walls and hull alike, creating a deafening symphony of destruction. But the humans pressed forward, modulating pulses, guiding the natural leviathans like shepherds, weaving a dangerous dance where instinct met ingenuity, a collaboration between species separated by millions of years, but united by necessity. And slowly, tentacle by tentacle, appendage by appendage, the engineered monsters began to falter, confused by the intrusion of an uncontrollable variable, the human signal, the unpredictability of adaptation, and the presence of allies that the aliens had never anticipated. While Dr. Malik traced paths along the canyon walls with a shaking hand, mapping the glowing alien markings and correlating them with the new harmonic pulses, discovering gaps in control, blind spots where the engineered leviathans were vulnerable, and Elena's mind sparked with tactical brilliance. They could turn the monsters into prisoners of the environment, lure them into caverns too tight for their enhanced bulk, funneling them into traps the aliens had not accounted for, using both terrain and natural allies. And as the sub twisted into a narrow crevice, the first hybrid creature, a terrifying fusion of alien design and deep-sea evolution, lunged with blinding speed, its glowing nodes flaring violently. But just as it struck, a massive native leviathan, drawn by the harmonic pulse, slammed into its flank with the force of a submerged boulder, staggering the hybrid long enough for the humans to maneuver past. The first clear demonstration that humans could not only survive, but manipulate the battlefield itself. And as the seconds stretched into minutes, more of the ancient guardians emerged from the shadows, their enormous forms gliding with grace and power, responding to every subtle frequency, circling the engineered monsters, hurting them, disrupting their attacks. And the sub-sonar screens became a chaotic dance of light and shadow, blips moving erratically as the humans guided allies and dodged foes, sparks flying, alarms blaring. Yet in the midst of the storm, a thrill of victory surged through Elena and her crew, for the aliens had calculated everything except humans' ability to improvise and adapt, to perceive patterns, to anticipate reactions, and to act unpredictably. And then came the next twist, terrifying in its scale. A new, colossal hybrid emerged from the black, a creature unlike any they had seen, part leviathan, part alien engineered monstrosity, eyes glowing with eerie intelligence, appendages bristling with bioluminescent nodes, larger than the sub itself. Its approach so fast that even the seasoned crew felt a pang of pure fear. Yet Elena did not hesitate, activating a series of complex maneuvers, guiding the natural leviathans into coordinated strikes, using harmonic pulses to direct them, luring the hybrid toward a natural cavern trap, a fissure barely large enough to contain its immense body. And the strategy worked, the hybrid colliding with the walls, thrashing violently, its strength immense but constrained by both terrain and the intervention of the ocean's native creatures. And as the sud navigated past, sparks raining from the consoles, water pressure bending the hull with every pulse, Elena realized something profound, something the aliens could never comprehend. Humans' ingenuity was amplified by understanding and respecting the environment and creatures around them, forming alliances that required not domination, but communication, intuition, and courage. And as the sub glided further into the trench, guided by instinct, sonar, and strategy, the crew witnessed moments of breathtaking synergy, leviathans circling hybrids, forcing them into dead ends, and the sub threading through impossible gaps, dodging strikes, avoiding crushing blows, each movement a ballet of desperation and brilliance. And then, the final twist of the scene revealed itself in the sonar readings. The alien's probe above was malfunctioning, the pulses irregular, nodes flickering, signals scrambled as the humans' unconventional tactics disrupted the network of control. The monsters no longer moving in perfect harmony, some confused, some retreating, some clashing against each other. And in the midst of that chaos, Elena allowed herself a fleeting smile, knowing that the abyss itself, ancient and unknowable, was on their side. But she also understood that this was only the beginning, that the aliens' plan was vast, their designs intricate, and the depths still held horrors beyond imagination. But in that moment, humans had taken the first decisive step in a war that spanned biology, technology, and intellect, showing that even in the deepest darkness, in a domain dominated by engineered monstrosities and alien interference, human ingenuity, courage, and adaptability could turn the tide. And as the sub twisted past another jagged outcrop, the crew caught fleeting glimpses of the ocean's native guardians, massive, intelligent, almost sentient, moving in response to human signals, powerful enough to rival the engineered hybrids. And Elena whispered to herself, "We are not alone, and we are not powerless." And in that declaration lay a truth the aliens would never anticipate. The unpredictable brilliance of humans, combined with the wisdom of the abyss, was a force beyond control, beyond calculation, and utterly unstoppable when fully realized. And as the Abyss Explorer plunged further into the deep, lights flickering, alarms screaming, hull groaning under pressure, the crew, trembling, battered, terrified, yet exhilarated, knew that in the vast alien-infested darkness of the trench, they had discovered an ally they could never have imagined, a partner in survival, a power older than humanity itself. And as the harmonic pulses reverberated through the canyon, guiding the leviathans, confusing the hybrids, disrupting the alien probe, the humans realized that they were no longer merely surviving, they were shaping the battle, turning the abyss into an extension of their strategy, a weapon against the very forces that sought to dominate them. And for the first time, amid terror and chaos, they felt the thrill of true hope, a fragile yet undeniable spark that in the heart of the abyss, humans could fight, adapt, survive, and even triumph. The Abyss Explorer surged forward through the twisting canyons of the Mariana Rift, battered, bruised, and groaning under pressures that would have pulverized any ordinary vessel. Yet inside, the crew clung to the edge of desperation and hope. Captain Elena Marquez's eyes scanning every monitor, every sonar pulse, every flicker of light in the eternal darkness as the engineered leviathans pressed their relentless assault, massive bodies cutting through water with terrifying speed, glowing appendages pulsing in rhythmic sequences designed by the alien probe above. But now, thanks to the harmonics of human ingenuity and the alliance of the ancient native leviathans, the tide of battle was shifting in ways the aliens could not predict. And as the sub twisted through a narrow chasm, sparks showering from the consoles and alarms screaming in unison with the hulls creaking, a colossal hybrid monster lunged, its tentacles wrapping around the cavern walls, glowing nodes pulsating violently. Yet in the same instant, the native Leviathan surged, coordinated through the sub's harmonic signals, circling the hybrid with precision and force, striking at weak points the aliens had designed to be invulnerable. And the crew watched in tense awe as the engineered monstrosity, designed to be unstoppable, faltered, staggered, and slammed against the jagged canyon walls, trapped by both environment and the ancient creatures whose instincts humans had tapped into. And in that moment, Elena issued a daring command, pushing the sub's thrusters to maximum, using the vessel not just as a tool for navigation, but as a tactical instrument. Her mind racing through probabilities, contingencies, and improvisations, anticipating the creature's every move and guiding the native leviathans to press the advantage. A dangerous, high-stakes ballet of predator and counter-predator, of human ingenuity against alien design. And as the sub darted past, another wave of hybrids emerged from the darkness, their bioluminescent nodes flaring in alarming synchronization. Yet they too hesitated, the harmonic pulses confusing their pre-programmed instincts, creating openings for humans and allies alike. And then came the next twist. From deeper in the trench, a titanic shadow loomed, far larger than any creature the crew had yet seen, its body an amalgamation of natural leviathan and alien engineering, eyes glowing with unnatural intelligence, tentacles tipped with radiant bioluminescence slicing the water like knives. And for a heartbeat, the crew froze, the sheer scale of the hybrid casting a shadow that swallowed the sub whole. But Elena's mind remained unflinching, calculating angles, currents, and probabilities, and with a decisive order, the sub's thrusters fired, propelling it directly toward the narrowest part of the trench, using the canyon itself as a trap, funneling the monstrous hybrid into a corridor too tight for its immense bulk, its glowing appendages scraping and thrashing violently against the rock walls, sparks of energy and displacement lighting up the darkness in brief, brilliant flashes, while the native leviathans struck from the sides, forcing the hybrid deeper, hurting it with a precision that no alien probe could have programmed. And the crew realized in awe that they had become a symbiotic force with the ocean itself, humans and ancient leviathans moving as one, improvising, adapting, turning instinct and ingenuity into a weapon that even the aliens could not anticipate. And as the hybrid thrashed, trapped in the canyon, the alien's probe above flickered erratically, its pulses destabilized, the network of control disrupted for the first time, revealing a fatal flaw in their designs. They had counted on perfect obedience, pre-programmed responses, but they had underestimated human unpredictability, courage, and strategy. And in that instant, hope surged through the crew, a tidal wave of determination that carried them through every shudder of the hull, every flare of light, every deafening strike of monstrous bodies colliding in the dark. And yet, there was no time to rest, for the probe, sensing its control slipping, initiated a final, desperate assault, sending a high-frequency wave that distorted the water, causing panic and disorientation in both engineered and natural creatures. And Elena acted without hesitation, modulating the harmonic sonar to stabilize the native leviathans, guide them through the chaotic turbulence, and even momentarily deceive the probe itself, creating micro-patterns that imitated dominant alien commands, turning its own system against it. And in the midst of this chaos, Dr. Malik worked frantically at the consoles, routing power, fine-tuning pulses, inputting calculations faster than any human should have been able to manage under such extreme stress. And slowly, with precise timing, the hybrid monsters, trapped, confused, and pressured from all sides, began to collapse into the canyon, one after another, while the native leviathans moved in a coordinated dance of strength and strategy, herding, striking, and protecting the humans. And the crew of the Abyss Explorer, battered and exhausted, realized that the impossible was happening. Humans, leveraging intuition, adaptability, and teamwork, had not just survived, they were winning, turning the ocean into both shield and weapon, outsmarting alien technology and engineered monsters alike. And as the final colossal hybrid thrashed violently against the walls of the canyon, Elena transmitted a warning to the surface world, her voice calm but urgent over the communication link, telling of the alien experiment, the weaponized monsters, and the alliance humanity had forged with the ancient guardians of the abyss. A message that carried both awe and dread, for it was a warning. The oceans were alive, capable of defending themselves, and humanity, clever and daring as ever, had proven themselves a force to be reckoned with. And yet, even in victory, suspense lingered, for from the shadows of the trench, deep beyond the lights and sonar, other movements hinted at threats yet unseen, aliens watching from orbit or distance, perhaps regrouping, perhaps planning a return, their designs far from complete. And in that tense stillness, as the sub navigated past the last of the trapped hybrids, Elena allowed herself a brief moment to breathe, marveling at the brilliance of her crew, at the courage of humans in the face of the unknown, at the audacity to survive, adapt, and overcome what even the galaxy had deemed unconquerable. And as the Abyss Explorer ascended slowly toward the upper layers of the ocean, the native leviathans gliding silently behind, their glowing eyes reflecting an almost sentient understanding, a respect for the humans who had fought alongside them, the final twist unfolded. The aliens had underestimated one elemental truth about Earth, about life, about humans themselves, that creativity, courage, empathy, and unpredictability were forces beyond calculation, and in that realization lay both the victory and the warning, for though the ocean won this battle, the war for its depths was only beginning, the probe flickering one last time before retreating, leaving behind a trench scarred, alive, and teeming with creatures whose loyalty, instinct, and sheer power had been awakened by humans. And as the crew surfaced, battered, exhausted, exhilarated, and profoundly changed, Elena whispered to herself, the dark waves stretching endlessly before them, "They may return, but we are ready. The ocean fights with us, and humanity never backs down." And in that echoing statement, the story closed on a note of triumph, suspense, and limitless possibility, leaving the abyss both conquered and mysterious, humans victorious yet wary, and the galaxy forever reminded that Earth, its oceans, and its people were forces no intelligence, no technology, and no alien ambition could ever fully control.